Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to have you. My name is Jen Wilson. I'm the Director of Programming and Advocacy with New England Museum Association, and joined by my colleague Heather Riggs, who's in our office up in Arlington. And we have a nice full group today for one of our joint sessions between our Small Museums PAG and our Registrars and Collections Care Specialist PAG. They've put together a great presentation, so I'm going to hand it right over to Samantha to do introductions, and then we can get rocking and rolling. Samantha, it's all yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be focusing on different collections policies as well as highlighting some case studies of collections management systems. The goal is to give a good overview, share the collection systems that we use, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end of everything. I am from the Small Museums PAG, and we also have the chairs from the Registrar and Collections Care Specialist. I am not the only chair of the Small Museums PAG, though. We also have Doria and Louise. And then the co-chairs of the RACCS PAG is Abby, Ashley, Megan, and Peggy. So thank you to everyone who has helped make this happen. And here is our agenda for today. So we're going to go over the why of our collections policy. We'll go over the what is in them, so the different parts of a collections policy. We'll highlight those case studies, and again, we'll have a Q&A. Do you guys think I covered everything? Great.
Yes.
Perfect.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Holm. So one of the things we want to talk about was the mission statement to collections pipeline. So your mission statement at your organization and your vision statements together will define your scope of collections, which is one of those statements that we rely on a lot as collections managers and registrars. It is impossible to collect, store, protect, preserve everything as much as we sometimes want to. So we need to establish limits to the collection. You need to define what you value and why. What do you collect? And then the opposite is also true. What don't you collect? Sometimes it's necessary to turn donors away because the objects don't fit your mission. And then there's also what medium do you collect? Do you do photos, archives, books, art, textiles, archaeology, furniture? All of those, the answers to all of those questions matter because they'll inform the later parts of how you manage your collection. And then there's also, can you store it? Can you store it safely? At my museum, we're a mill museum. We have the history of industrialization in Manchester, as well as the history of the city as well, Manchester, New Hampshire. And so sometimes I have to turn away people who show up and say, I have a piece of machinery that was used in the mills, but I don't have any room to store it anymore. So I have to turn them away a lot of the time. Sorry, technology moment.
So my name is Megan Pacwa. I'm from the Fairfield University Art Museum. And so once you have really considered your mission statement, not just in terms of defining your collection, what you are and aren't collecting, as Ashley just said, but also thinking about how you intend to use the collection. Is your collection something that is, are you an actively collecting institution? Do you have, are you a historic home that has a static collection that you're not going to be adding to because it's not what's in the house? Are you an institution that does less of a, has less of a permanent collection focus and more of a temporary exhibitions focus? Are you, like my museum is an academic art museum, is your collection being used primarily to support education, whether that's our on-campus community with the university or K through 12 school groups or lifelong learners? What is really not just the scope of your collection, but how are you going to use it? Because that determines what type of information you will need to record and easily access about the collection later down the road. But once you actually get started with drafting a collections policy, there are a few key pieces that you'll need to include, as well as, again, your institutions and your workflows and your institutional knowledge better. And sometimes that can get a little particular to a given institution or type of institution. You'll want to basically outline that information in a coherent, easy to reference policy document. So the statement of purpose should really be discussing how you are going to be caring for your collection, whatever your collection looks like, however much or little it grows, to serve your mission. How is this collection in service of your institution's mission? The purpose and use of the collections, as I said, what the scope of the collection, what are your main collecting areas? Sometimes this document can be, or this section can be a separate document, as it is in my institution's case. We were not originally an actively collecting institution. We are much more so now, but we had a collections management policy before that change happened. So now we have what we call the collecting plan, where we outline different areas of interest and priority for collecting versus things that are not what we would like to be collecting necessarily because it doesn't serve our mission. You would outline your policies around acquiring new objects into the collection, whatever those types of objects might be. Things like who needs to be told that there's a new accession? If you are buying something, who needs to get the approval for releasing the funds and things like that? What forms need to be sent out and when. Are votes required? Are votes required if something is worth over a certain dollar value? Or if it's under a certain dollar value, can you just let people know in an end of the year newsletter? As well as deaccessioning guidelines. So the same thing, just for getting rid of stuff from the collection, if that's something your institution allows for. And while a lot of this might seem like things that are a little tedious to list out in a document form, if it's something where everyone just kind of knows how it works, where everyone kind of knows what the collection is and isn't, as a staff of 4.5, where we all share basically one office and can just shout questions at each other, we have quickly realized that if one of us leaves or gets hit by a bus, as I am often reminding everyone, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that individual people take with them. And I'm sure, especially in the small museum world, you guys know that you get that one volunteer that's been there for the last 40 years, moves away, and think about everything that gets lost. So this is about preserving, institutional policy across generations of, workers and volunteers. But it's also useful as a tool to explain why you do what you do, especially if you have some type of oversight committee or board, or if you're an embedded institution like I am and you have to go to the provost and explain, this is why we can't just do that. It's really useful to have an actual policy document instead of, well, Megan over in the museum office said so, and said that's how they always do it. So it can be a useful reminder of why you do what you do, not just for yourselves, but for anyone you're having these kinds of conversations
with. So if you're at the point of trying to decide that you need a collections management software, and we've been talking about collections policy and vision statement and mission statement and how all these things are related, stop and consider, where are you now and where do you want to be? And what is important to your organization and your stakeholders and your board and your community and these stakeholders that make up your organization? And then consider the cost versus effort of getting your collections organized and the time-saving measures that may or may not go together. As we approach these case studies, sometimes there is benefit in doing one or the other, as opposed to jumping in on something that might be shiny, but not necessarily helpful. So one of the things we have experienced in kind of contrasting my organization with Megan's is this born digital versus community attic phenomenon. And we can both kind of talk to what that looks like in our in our experiences, and whether or not how that influences our experiences. Excel spreadsheets can be a great way to organize your museum's collection. They're relatively inexpensive once you have the Microsoft Word collection. And you just have columns of information and onward you go. My organization was the community's attic for 130 years. So I don't have necessarily all of the records digitized. We had binders of paper records that a volunteer a few decades digitized, which I'm very grateful for because they're much easier to search on an Excel spreadsheet. But it is not necessarily easy to search. Some of them have gotten put into PastPerfect, but not all of them. And then from there, we've been adding in the last several years to PastPerfect, but it is an evolving process. All of these CMS systems are very similar, and they have different modules designed for different types of collections, whether that's a library or archive or archaeology or object-based collection. They usually have different headers, different sections that are geared toward different types of collections. So when you look about to decide what would fit yours, that will inform your decision. Do you have more library books that knowing the ISBN number would be helpful? Do you have archaeology that it would be helpful to search based on stratigraphy? Or archive collections where knowing where particular papers and which family's collection you're looking at is particularly helpful. All of those things go together and are helpful to search. I'll let Megan jump on the rest of that.
So in contrast, my institution is a very young institution. We were founded in 2010. And we were born digital. So we're very, very, very lucky. Our first accessions got entered directly into a CMS, into a collections database. But we do still have Excel spreadsheets. We actually do the reverse where we export Excel spreadsheets or export data from our database into Excel spreadsheets to keep in binders, in this anachronistic, because it just feels better to have the spreadsheet on paper somewhere, right? We feel weird not having it. And one of the things that we needed to consider when our museum was being organized is that, again, as an embedded institution, we do have other departments and organizations on campus that, while we were defining what the museum will and will not be responsible for, which again goes back to our very first ever mission statement and statement of purpose and all of that from 2010. We have a libraries, archives, and special collections on campus that have their own CMS system because ultimately, for a lot of university bureaucratic reasons, as well as just as much as we love a good collaboration and GLAM, it made more sense to keep us as a separate entity. We don't use their CMS. Their CMS is also geared a little bit more towards the libraries and archives world, as it should be. But theoretically, if we had been really stuck at the beginning, we could have tried to make more of a digital collaboration with them. So that is also something to consider, is if you have other partners that you could be potentially working with. I know something in Connecticut that is growing, and I'm not the person to speak to because unfortunately we're not a member of it, because our IT department won't let me be. There's the Connecticut Collections, which is a collaborative database and also online collections portal that I can attest is extremely user-friendly and it's great. And we don't get to live there, unfortunately. Thank you, Diane. But you could look around and see if your region or your state has something similar as well. So it's, when you're getting started with going digital, you don't need to reinvent the wheel necessarily, but also you want to make sure that if you are investing in a software, that it is actually doing what you need it to do, based on what your collection and your collecting activities look like.
Mhm. Um, and before we move on, I wanted to also make note, um, in most cases, even if an individual has a experience with more than one system, it's rare for organizations to change systems over time because it is a very involved multi-year process, that most organizations are very, very, very hesitant to do. Um, I know the historic Deerfield and the five colleges just completed their migration, and it looks beautiful, but it was a multi-year project that took a lot of work and effort. And so I caution anyone, to think that, we'll start with this, and then a couple years down the road we'll go to something flashier. Um, make the decision, with caution, and don't be afraid of using the Excel spreadsheets originally, and make sure you gather your information more importantly than investing in flashy softwares.
And I can speak to that a little bit. I have a bit of a weird collection. I think everybody's collection is a little bit strange in general, but my museum is a part of a larger organization that is an agricultural fair. So not only do we have an 1840s living history museum that focuses on New England heritage, so everything from farming to rare books to old forms of photography, so slides, things like that. We collect from as early as the early 18th century to the end of the 19th century. And that's just the museum. Then we have the Eastern States Exposition Collection, which is all materials related to the Eastern States Exposition, which is, again, is an agricultural fair. So we have all of the things that are associated with that collection, which is modern day farming equipment. And I have a Ferris wheel seat in my archive room right now. The limits are endless to our collection. And unfortunately, we are currently in the middle of having to switch our collections management system. So I can speak to that part. We currently use CollectiveAccess, and I know there are plenty of organizations who successfully use CollectiveAccess. We started using this system actually 3 years ago now, and it was where we needed to start. The benefits to us were it was open source. We already work with an IT company, so it was pretty seamless for them to start the server, to manage it, to get that up and going for us. So for us, it was essentially cost free. There was nothing associated with it, which again was what we needed because our collection started in 1916 and it has gone through floods. It has gone through World War I and World War II when our grounds were taken over and officers were living in our buildings. That was great. And then we have multiple generations of collections employees who started a project, had to stop it because other things took precedence, and then another generation was like, great, we're going to start where they stopped. And new systems were created. They were improving the old system. It all was what needed to happen at that time. But it also means that inevitably we are sorting through weird things, and CollectiveAccess for us was useful to get everything in one place. I say everything. We're not fully in there yet. But now we're running into the because of our security, we have to use the system on grounds. It can't be used off grounds unless it's through a company gateway. And not only that, but again, many museums have used this successfully, but whatever our IT company is doing, it's causing issues that other people aren't necessarily having. I have also had to learn coding to make a lot of the import mapping work. So there are a lot of skills involved with collective access and open source system and problems that you might not necessarily have working with a cloud-based software where another system is managed, another company is managing it, who is the actual company that the software is from. So that is my experience with collective access. It has worked mostly fine, but we're just starting to get to the point where we're outgrowing it and it's no longer fitting our needs just based on some of the problems that we're having.
I'd like to jump in and tell quickly about a similar journey that we had. We, after much hemming and hawing and talking, decided that we needed to get a formal collection management system of some sort because we had spreadsheets, we had PowerPoint files, we had paper, we had all kinds of things. And we looked around, selected Collect It, looked like it would work for us. So what we had to do then is get our data in order to load it up to Collect It. By the time we finished that, I had a spreadsheet that was just fine. We did not have to, we just decided that would do for our small museum. So the effort of just organizing everything in one place, making sense of it, might meet the needs that you have currently.
I just want to echo that also, and about the point about the spreadsheet. And some of you may have seen my comment in the chat. All hail the trusty spreadsheet. And I represent a museum that has a huge art collection, and I'm the only full-time staff. And even if you have a collection management system, which I recommend, I think it's great to keep track of things digitally, for searchability, all that kind of thing. And you can have images, and we do have essentially a collections management system, although it's not, it's a little unorthodox, more on that later. But I recommend, always have a spreadsheet as your backup. Always have something that you can access offline if you can't get on, if you don't have Wi-Fi, if you don't have internet. You always want to have that spreadsheet, that trusty document. You can print it out. It's just having that redundancy, critical, not critical, but just having that as a backup you will be happy for that someday, as will your successors. So yay for the spreadsheet.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the contrasting experiences. Very good. Yeah, everyone's got different experiences.
So kind of jumping back to really the bare bones, kind of to Louise's point about getting your data and your information in a row is sometimes 99 to 100% of the battle, because you will need to have this information in a somewhat manageable form if you are going to be importing it into a collections management system. And I realize that sounds rich coming from the girl who was born digital, but I have been part of digitization projects, so I do know exactly what kind of an ask and a lift that can be. But you're going to want to make sure that you are identifying all of the key information about your collection. So on the slide here, we have a few examples of some of the basic identifying information, that would be relevant to most, if not all, types of collections. If you, again, are not a collecting institution, you are a temporary exhibitions and loans-based institution, replace donor name with lender name there, and I think it all still mostly works. But something to consider as well is when you are collecting all this information, whether it's you're pulling things out of old spreadsheets or out of old files, or you're making the docent who's been there for 50 years sit down and finally tell you what's in that closet. And for real, I know there's a box no one's moved since 1962, but please, what is in the box? No one has that key anymore. As you're collecting all this information, you should be thinking about the types of information that you are often called upon to produce yourself about the collection, whether that is, while you are leading tour groups, or if you have visiting researchers, or if you have, again, a board or somebody that you need to report out to, what is the type of information that you often need to have easily to hand? If somebody comes to you and says, I need to know how many, photographs by Dutch artists from the 20th century we have in the collection, somebody needs to know this right now for a grant, will you be able to produce all of that information like that, if that's something that you get asked, or the type of question you get asked on a weekly basis or quarterly basis or anything like that? Because that's something to consider as you are not only gathering your information and making sure that you are collecting the details that will allow you to produce that information, but it's also something to consider when you're choosing your collections management software. Is this going to be something it can figure out how to tell you easily? Because if you need to put together a 8-part search query to get to a number or a list that you have to produce frequently enough, you might want to see if something else can do it better and faster and with less technical skill involved, because if it's not a functional tool, it is not going to be useful. If it's not something that you can actually use, all hail the mighty spreadsheet, right? Like you might not necessarily need to go fully, SQL based relational database collections management system just yet. I do think that there's a lot of utility in having one of those just from a collections registrar standpoint. But if the only one that you can acquire, whether that's because of your tech support setup, your budget, the skills available to your staff, if it's not something that will actually be useful for you, it's that extra 1% that you should really hold off on finishing and really focus on making the data collecting and data organizing on the old spreadsheet really, really good, so that when you can afford that perfect system, or you find the system that's not perfect but close enough, you're ready to just do a nice smooth import in. Because the last thing you want is a very expensive digital fossil. Ask me how I know. We've got one, that's how I know.
All right. We have some questions that I think the small museums folks organized for us.
Yes. Well, this is a great one, and I'd love to sort of start off with this because this really inspired me, this particular one. I want to get real with you guys. So, as you may know, I'm one of the small museums PEG co-chairs, and I run a very, very small museum. And we have a very, very large collection. And when I took over as collection manager, right at the beginning, right before the pandemic, and it was during the pandemic that we essentially had to choose a CMS or a way to organize things. I was still getting up to speed. We were trying to figure all of this out. And frankly, one of the top criteria that we had was we needed something cheap. Real talk,
Yes,
small
yes.
museums. Some of you may be able to relate to this. We needed something cheap. We needed something that I could easily use since I was going to be the main person using it. I don't have the skills to do something. I don't code. So I've thought about CollectiveAccess and quickly realized, oh, that's just not going to work for me. And I ended up going with an outfit called Artwork Archive, which isn't necessarily, some of you may have heard of it. It's not necessarily up there in the league of some of the big time players for collections management systems, but I realized that it would do the basic stuff that we needed. The other thing is that they offered us a really nice nonprofit discount. So we pay, drumroll please, $176.40 a year for this system. And one of the first things I discovered, novice me, is that as I was like doing all the work of uploading all the digital images and setting everything up, figuring out what was going to be the front end and the back end, all that kind of thing, is that I could generate a spreadsheet from this. It was just a stroke of a key, and boom, suddenly I had a spreadsheet of everything I had done. And that's when this all kind of dawned on me about how important that spreadsheet backup was. So I continued doing all of the uploading, and I spent basically the entire pandemic putting everything into our artwork archive and figuring out what was going to be visible to the public, what was going to be my back end that I was going to use, but also then having this actually a couple of different spreadsheets. So that's my long-winded answer to that question. That's how we chose that particular one. And we would love to now open this up to participants and see if other people have interesting answers to this question. How did your organization choose your CMS? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to answer that. And if anybody else, any of our group want to answer that too, that's just my particular one that I wanted to throw out. Patricia.
Yeah, I just wrote something in the chat. We're actually facing that situation right now. I took over working or volunteering here about 2 years ago, and we discovered we were out of space. So we spent the time moving, and we moved into our new space in June of last year. And I've been trying to create a museum. But what we're discovering on the spreadsheet that they had a really nice spreadsheet, but they didn't fill in all the fields. They left the location field empty. And then they did another spreadsheet that's attached to that worksheet that has box inventory, but it doesn't always have the accession number on it. And then
that creates a great opportunity for you, doesn't it?
and the description on the first spreadsheet, they didn't just copy and paste that description. They typed in another description. So we're trying to figure out how we can. We're kind of picking catalog it as a CMS because it would. I'm a Mac person, so it would look Mac-like, and it has nice white pages, and
nice.
It has. We have museum items plus archives items, so it's a combination of the two. And I've looked at PastPerfect, but it seems kind of archaic. I don't know.
Interesting.
To me, it is because number one, I would never put something on a PC that's only located in that computer, and can only be accessed by one person.
That's a good point. Thank you for that.
We have another historical society next to us, and they've done that. And if that person is working, no one else can get in to look at the system. It's not on a shared system. So no one else can check it out. Nobody else can answer a question or whatever. But getting back to our problem is we're digging into this thing, and we're opening up boxes, and we're finding the manual system was not done correctly. If that had been done correctly, we would have an easier time trying to create a digital system.
Patricia, thank you for weighing in on these topics. This is, I think, very relatable for a lot of us.
Yeah.
Betsy, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, our organization has had collections going back to 1899, so we can relate to the little scraps of paper, accession books, index cards, old accession sheets, nothing, I've started with some spreadsheets just going room by room to help me organize the eventual data. We've used PastPerfect. I don't like it. I don't think the search feature works at all. And like Patricia just said, if you can only use it in the site and only at the desktop, it's not very useful. And I just think the search feature is useless. So we are in the process of switching over to CollectiveAccess after seeing how it worked in Connecticut and thought it looked like a great system. And thankfully, we have somebody from another organization who's tech savvy enough that she's worked through with us how to get it started, and we're just about to launch it. And I can't wait to start entering things. It may take me 300 years, but I'm going to do it.
All you need is a pandemic. That will give you all the time you need. As I discovered, I got really lucky with that timing, and I still feel like guilt over the fact that it was such a blessing to me and my org, the timing
Well,
of
I'm
it.
retiring in June, so I'm going to have more time. But
Ooh, well, there you
yes,
go.
yes.
You know what? It just occurs to me now that we're in the Q&A section, Ashley, we may be able to stop sharing and then we can sort of see the whole screen, and but we and our little team co-chairing this, we can ask the different questions. Yes, this is the next one. What is the biggest challenge? We've kind of moved into this. That's the next question I'd love to pose to the group. What is the biggest challenge you've encountered with your CMS? Anybody want to take that on?
You can kick us off since I have a lot of grievances and I love to complain a little
Yes.
bit. So my collections software is Gallery Systems Embark, which I know a lot of people love. A lot of people have a lot of loyalty to it and have been forced to use other systems like TMS and tell me I'm very lucky to get to use Embark, and I would love to share that enthusiasm. Unfortunately, I do not. The reason why we had picked Embark, just as a little bit of background, is because we wanted TMS and we could not afford TMS. Embark is a very scalable product, and it came with a lot of built-in features that it could do right out of the box if you just pay enough money to unlock it, and we unlocked things as we went. At the time that the museum was founded and that this collections management software was chosen, they were a staff of 2. So things like only being able to afford a single user at a time was not a problem. But now, even with a staff of 4, we still can only afford a single user login at a time. And for some reason, if you try to log in while somebody else is in the system, it crashes it for everyone.
Oh,
Gallery Systems assures me that that is a bug unique to us. But regardless, this is a pain point that we experience. So we have a little, basically a little magnet that travels around the office, and you have to steal it if you want to get into the database to let people know that you're in the database.
like
So
passing the talking stick.
exactly. So born digital, but still, we still have our problems. And this obviously makes it very difficult to do any sort of collaborative project using the database. So when I was talking about it being a fossil earlier, functionally, our collections database works for the permanent collection, the campus art, public art collection, and long-term loans that are here for more than 6 months. Because anything for a temporary exhibition can't be put in there because too many people need it all at once, and we can't use it.
Can I jump in there for a minute?
Yep.
We found a way around some of the issues with just having it on a spreadsheet, for instance, which is our spreadsheet is on Google Spreadsheets.
Yep.
We can share it with people that we want, and we can block them out. We can temporarily share it, and that was a huge leap for us when we realized that we didn't need a CMS system to share the data.
Absolutely, yeah. And we now have sort of like a Franken system of so the permanent collection of long-term loans lives in the database, and then all of our temporary exhibitions planning happen through the Google Suite because it's shareable and collaborative, and you can edit in real time, and you can all be in the document all at once looking at it. What magical functionality this is. I can't stress enough how much we can't do that with our CMS. But again, that's not necessarily unique to, or that's not a problem of our system. That's us not being able to afford that feature problem. And so there is something to be said for looking at a system that can scale. If there are features that you can integrate into, when you are ready to, let's say, launch a public facing collections website, but you're not ready yet. But someday down the road, you would like to be. If you get a system where that is an add-on, that is a feature, they have a native program that can talk to your database with very little difficulty, but you don't need it right now. It's good to keep that in the back of your mind of where you would like to be going with this system. But at the same time, remember that you are only getting what you pay for when you do the scalable software. So it can do lovely things, and when you call IT to complain about why it crashes when somebody tries to log in and their answer is, well, pay us more money, and that won't happen.
Yeah.
It's good and bad. So.
Getting into what some people were hinting at with sort of this idea of having a Frankenstein system of sorts, which is very true. And you often do have to, like for a small org like mine, we often do have to sort of piece together things, right? We don't have the funds for like one big fancy all-encompassing thing. So we have various places where we store different kinds of information. So as I mentioned earlier, I have, of course, a trustee spreadsheet, which I love, a couple of them actually. And I also have the artwork archive where we have our forward facing, public facing element so that people can browse, but then there's also a back end. But I realized quickly that I wasn't going to be able to load up all of our thousands of digital image for a very considerable collection. So for a lot of our smaller works on paper, of which we have thousands in portfolios, and they were digitized, I have those all on Dropbox files and folders. And the thing with Dropbox is it's not wildly expensive as some of these CMS programs are, but you can make certain folders shareable. So if I have our artist in residence intern who's working with files and needs to upload things to Dropbox, I can share a folder and they have access and we can kind of communicate back and forth in that way. And then as they leave and a new person comes in, I can transfer that access and it can be read only, it can be edit, it can be a mix. So that's been a really handy feature too, just throwing in that plug. So yeah, so I have so I've got the spreadsheet, I've got the artwork archive, I've got my documents and my PDF files, and I've got my Dropbox. So yeah, it's a bit of a Frankenstein kind of a system, but it works, and so important for us is it's affordable. So I'm just throwing that in. Yeah, so this is good. We've been getting into challenges. We have a few other questions that we thought of. Does anybody want to make a plug and say what has been the biggest benefit of having a CMS for those of you who have one?
I can go off this one a little bit. As much as CollectiveAccess has some pain points is a nice way of putting it for us. A lot of the issues that we encounter is just due to the way that our system is set up. I think they're just open source is always going to have problems with it. That's what you kind of get with having an open source system. So some of them are expected, but a lot of the solutions don't work for us, which is why we think it's an us problem. But for CollectiveAccess, it is extremely customizable. We are able to do pretty much whatever we want. We can create different modules. We can have as many users as we want. We can have users that have administrative access. We can have users that have read-only access. We can have in between of any level. So almost everything about this system is customizable. And if we had all the features and had it working, it would be wonderful. It does have the ability to have a website with it, so that's fantastic. Due to security reasons for us, we can't have that website. It's not something our IT company is comfortable with. But if it had been an option for us, it would be great to just be able to upload it directly to our website. So again, the customization, if we were able to do everything we wanted to, and we do use some of that customization now, it's been incredibly helpful.
Did anybody else want to make a plug perhaps for the CMS that you or your org uses, if you particularly like it? Oh, Diane Lee, yes.
Hi. So full disclosure, I am the collections manager at the Fairfield Museum. I can wave to Megan from, a couple miles away. I'm also a consultant with the Connecticut Collections Project run by the Connecticut League of Museums, which is a project working with CollectiveAccess. Basically, Fairfield was one of the groups that kind of spearheaded forming basically a kind of consortium with the league to put CollectiveAccess in place. The director at the time saw a demonstration, thought it was great, worked directly with the guy who helped create the system on this to customize our own system, put it into place with the idea being we would be able to make any fees, any costs scalable. So smaller all volunteer organizations would be able to afford it along with larger budget organizations like ourselves. It it is that like trick of with the whole open source software that I've talked about to people for years. It's great, wicked customizable, awesome. If you don't have that tech support behind you, it does become difficult. We do have the tech support because of this consortium model, so it works well for us. Being able to do a lot of stuff. Just as collections manager in my own system, I can do a ton of stuff. I used to be on TMS at my old place. I loved it. It was great. It's a Cadillac. You really need to dig into it. But there was a lot of stuff that I couldn't do being a programmer that I can do on CollectiveAccess because of the way the ability you can have to get to things. So I am very pro CollectiveAccess if you can pull the resources to have a consortium kind of model in the backup. We did this, we're about 10 years old now. We started and went live in 2016. And also we talk a lot with people in Minnesota. They followed our model and did the same thing out there. And it's working really well for them too, because they have that backup. So we need NEMA to sponsor us and we can create a whole New England consortium for everybody. So you don't have to just be in Connecticut.
That is so cool.
It's
Diane,
really
thank you
cool.
for that. That is, I've just been curious about that. So that sort of answered some of my curiosity about that system. And I think that's really cool. I think that really loops back in with what, with what Megan and Ashley were getting at earlier with their presentation, which is that whatever system you choose or whatever Franken system you construct, it has to work for you who's using it, you like your team and your org. So, a system that might work like amazingly well for one situation, one organization, one museum, because they have the right tech support or the right person on their team or something, might not work for another one and vice versa. So that kind of knowing who you are, knowing your collection, knowing your team, knowing yourself, and what your strengths and weaknesses are is so critical when it comes to choosing whatever system you choose. Let's see. Oh, there's another wonderful question that our team thought up earlier that I'd like to throw out to the group, which is, what is the most important feature that you need in a CMS, even if it isn't present in the one you currently use? So this is our like pie in the sky, like what would you love to have? Any thoughts on that? I see in the chat somebody said, I really want searchability. I think that, and Megan was getting at that with things she was talking about earlier with, every so often you'll get, and I get this too, I'll get a query for some piece of information or data. And I'm like, ah, and then I sort of scramble around trying to figure out like how and where do I search that? So constantly in between queries, I'm constantly trying to think, how do I make my setup more searchable? Like for myself. And also potentially for successors. Shout out to succession planning, which is like a little side thing that my team has been focused on a fair amount. So searchability, I love that. Oh, and I see there's more questions about CollectiveAccess in the chat. Diane, you might want to take a look at that since you're sort of in the know there. But yeah, any thoughts on any other special features? Oh my God, searchability is so critical. I feel like if you don't have searchability in your current setup, then your current setup is not working for you well enough. And it's like it would be an urgent thing to be like, we need something better to be able to know what you have and to be able to find what you have.
There's another thing that's related to that I think is important, and that is you need to be able to track who's making changes. You need to know who put in everything, and
Yes.
that's not always available in these systems. But I think it's just so important to know who and when was this updated, and especially if, like us, it's not clear where a lot of our stuff is. We have many places that it might be, and is it really in bin number 10 in that storage, or was that from 3 years ago when we did a physical inventory. So yeah, who put that in that data and when is really important stuff.
Absolutely. I realize we're down to our last 8 or so minutes. Um, and I'm well, before I forget, there we had a final page in Ashley's wonderful presentation on useful resources. There are some links and things that we might want to just I might actually just copy that and plunk that into the chat while I'm thinking of it.
Good.
Yes, I know we had a request. Oh, that works too,
Yeah.
Daria. I know we had a request for the slides to be sent. I might ask Jen and our NEMA support if we can figure out a way to do that. Thank you, Jen.
Oh,
So
Diane says that they might be doing a session at the NEMA conference this year. Ooh, that would be really cool. I think a lot of people would be really interested and would benefit from that. So I did just plunk a bunch of links for things relating, just things that we thought might be useful to you guys relating to some of these topics that we've gotten to. The first, I actually found at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, they have a collections management, basically like a policy making, it's a kit to like if you don't have a collection management policy, no shame. Our org is still like working on that. I'm still working on my board. But they have a wonderful toolkit to help you put that together, which is really great. And a collections management policy is wonderful for many of the reasons that Ashley and Megan talked about earlier in our presentation, but also for succession planning reasons. And that's a whole other conversation. But yes, we strongly urge that.
Another resource that I want to make sure we don't forget about is going to the NEMA conference is a great
Yes.
way to see demonstrations of these systems, to talk to the people without the kind of pressure you might feel if they come to you and you're in a hard sell situation. But it's I don't know, there must have been 4, 5, 6 at the last conference, and and they all wanted to talk. So.
Yes, these are hot topics and they're important, and that's why all of you are here. And I want to thank everybody for being here, by the way. I know we're getting down to our last few minutes, and I don't want to forget this thanking everybody who helped to make this possible today and all of you participating and sharing and asking questions and being on the chat. And and in fact, I see, oh, good, there's a Jen just shared the NEMA conference website on the chat. And Rachel asked who made the toolkit, if that's in reference to the collections management policy toolkit. Again, that's the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. They've done a lot of really good work. They just have it's a really deep dive into all kinds of links and how to make your own policy, and there's webinars and everything that they offer. And they get a lot into how that links to succession planning for your org, but you can also just you can just go into like, how do I make a collections management policy and just focus on that. And it's very helpful, very well laid out. See, oh, Mikey says, in CollectiveAccess on my catalog form, I have a field where we list whether or not it is marked. Oh, handy. Mikey, did you want to speak to that more about your usage of CollectiveAccess and
Sure. I actually I work at two historical societies, Pelham as well as Amherst. Both use access. Pelham did it directly from Collective Access, and Amherst is connected with the Connecticut group because we had somebody called named Mary Ann Curling who wanted us to be involved in the Connecticut, and so we are. But we have more glitches on that one than at Pelham because we have a woman in Pelham that is a database guru and she'll do anything for me. So on hers, I can create any type of form. So she'll create a form for me so that I can work with whomever. And so everything that's cataloged is always entered when it's marked, who marked it, the backup sheet, the accessions book, everything's filled out. So it all works together. I also work with our Artwork Archive, but
Oh
that's
yeah.
in my other life.
Yeah.
I catalog artists' artwork for different encaustic artists across the country. So I catalog for them too. And Artwork Archive, I adore.
I've been very happy with them, I have to say. I mean, a lot of it is oriented towards artists or collectors
Right,
organizing their collections, but it's worked really well. And it may be in part just because my org is so small and I'm really the only person who's using it.
right,
And so it just, again, as I was sort of saying earlier, it's whatever works for you in your position, in your org,
right.
and for your collection. And so I have to give that shout out
Right.
again also for what you
Also,
guys do.
Artwork Archive has meetings all the time.
Yep.
You could go to all sorts of learning sessions. They're phenomenal.
Yeah, they're good with
Absolutely phenomenal.
support and extras. You get a lot of bang for your buck with them. I've
Right.
been quite
I
happy.
agree.
Yeah. Well, we're down to our last 2 minutes. Does anyone want to just share anything else while we're here? I again want to share my thanks to all of you and to Nima and to my cohorts in the Small Museums PAG and the RACCS PAG for joining us. And we've really been enjoying just collaborating with other groups. You know, as Louise said, small museums that's such a broad term that it really is nice to drill down into a particular area and get more specific with people who really know and have worked in those specific areas. So thank you for your expertise, Megan and Ashley, and thank you again to all of you and my buddies Louise and Samantha and the folks at NEMA for joining us. This is great. We hope to see you at future Zooms, small museums Zooms, RACCS Zooms, and eventually at the conference in November. It
Yeah,
feels far away, but
it is
we're
not.
it's not. And if you want to present, we're thinking about like, now's your time
Yeah,
to get your
that's
applications in.
yeah, thank you. Dory, I'm going to take it away for 1 second based
Yes.
right on that. That's a great segue. So our call for proposals is actually this Friday, March 27th. So we are in the final countdown. We are expecting the Great Flood to happen, where on the Thursday into Friday, we get more than half of our proposals in. But the strength of conference is made up by people who are submitting sessions. So if you have an idea, even if it's like a nation ephemeral, like I think I want to do this, but you don't have it formed, submit it. We'd love to see what you're doing. We want to hear from everybody across the field, big, small, rural, urban, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world of museums. You're welcome. I dropped a couple of links into the chat. We'll be in Mystic, Connecticut. So we'll be in Connecticut. Yay! And that'll be the first week of November. All the information is on our website, and we'll be adding more as we go along as details evolve and solidify as we get through the year. If you have any questions about the conference, feel free to drop Nima an email. You can contact anybody in the staff. There are three of us. We're also not a small museum, but we are small. And we'll pretty much like Megan, we can shout it across the room and get it out to everybody. Thank you to small museums, thank you to RACCS, and thank you all to being here. This is a great conversation. I'm happy to see everybody here, and I love seeing the cross-pollination. I got it in. Thank you, folks. We'll see you in April.